So do you have any reflections or thoughts on Saturn-Moon conjunctions?
Yeah, Saturn and Moon is another kind of tough one to have. You guys asked about all the toughest ones, it
Yeah.
seems like. Saturn and Moon conjunction can be tough because anytime a planet's conjunct Saturn, it's going to get starved. So the Moon gets starved by Saturn, and Saturn gets starved by the Moon. And can it be agitated if it's waning? No, wait. Wait,
Just stick with the starve for now.
no, let's not complicate things.
Yeah.
So Saturn and Moon together, they both can kind of hurt each other in a way. And I do have a lot of experience with that with clients. I don't have that as much in my chart, but I do have a lot of clients who've had that. Typically, there's a lot of emotional stuff to work through, a lot of emotional karmas. You've got a lot of you've got your lack, like I've said, like we've been talking about Saturn. Wherever Saturn's at in your chart is an area where you've got, it's kind of like Rahu, where you've got to just keep working on, unless it's exalted or something. There's going to be a lot of there's going to be negative karma there, just to be simple, to be in a general sense. And the Moon is our ego mind, the manas, the sense mind. It's from the yoga perspective, it's really quite cool because the ego, the mind, will do whatever it can to survive, and the ego will do whatever it can to keep perpetuating its own existence. So the Moon is the only planet that has no enemies. So it will even latch on to old Saturn or Mars or something and want to get and be like, yes, I'm Saturn. I'm latched onto this. I'm sad. I'm terrible. I'm old. I'm, unable to function or in some way, because that is Saturn things. So you get people who basically want their lack validated as them, as this is who I am. And so as an astrologer, we have to counsel people, you're not your problems, you're not your history, you're not all of your baggage and all the things people did to you. You are pure consciousness, whatever you want to call it. You're much more than that. And that's something that is really hard, though, to counsel people on, because it shows that there's this past life ingrained impression in the mind to just, woe is me, to be like, oh, woe is me, all, I'm just suffering, I'm nothing, and
or to feel bad about themselves.
Yeah, and it's not like all the time, but it's just that once a month when the Moon does its thing, then that person just has a real mood swing or an issue like that. That's very common. But at the same time, it's not all bad, because if say the Moon is your Atmakaraka and it's waning or something, and you're a yogi and you're practicing detachment, you can make this work for you. So it's not, I don't want to be a downer in this whole interview about Saturn. But.
Well, it's always important to talk about this because it is a good idea to promote detachment and things. But I do have to say, maybe it's my realistic Saturn, is that even when I talk to yogis about learning this sense of detachment, that's the last thing they want to hear when they've got Saturn Moon. So.
Oh, yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. So yeah. It's hard because they want to change, and we all, we want to change, we want to grow. But when you've got Saturn Moon, there's going to be that tendency to not know how to look at anything else. It's like if you've been raised to think that if you don't take advantage of other people, they're going to take advantage of you. And it's so in your mind that to think that you could survive or be happy or thrive without doing that, it's just like, our aliens landing, and that's part of the difficulty I found with Saturn Moon, is that wherever it's placed, that's usually where the person's going to focus on. Like one woman I know, she's got Saturn Moon and she has it in her 5th house. And all she is focused on is how horrible of a person she is, and she's not going to raise her kids right, and she'll never actually have kids. It's just this focus on everything that could possibly go wrong will go wrong, because that's what she's used to focusing on. So luckily, for those of you who are listening, there's a book that I recommend to many people called The Presence Process. And I recommend this for Saturn-Mars combinations, Saturn-Sun combinations, Saturn-Moon combinations. Those are the main 3, but pretty much any Saturn combination in that regard. And the reason I recommend it is because it's going to allow you to go very deeply to kind of go back and heal those old wounds of Saturn. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, well, what do I do? That would be my first advice, was to get the book, The Presence Process, if you can. And if not, you might need to work with a counselor, really someone who can give you outside advice and encourage you to be a little more positive. So anyway, I just wanted to fit that in there. So back to you, Corey.
I absolutely agree with that. And yeah, you do need to seek professional help if it's something that you can't feel like you can handle on your own. And oftentimes with that combination, you don't feel like you can handle on your own.
Right.
And you just need someone to listen, and just sort of venting through it or whatever it is over time.
Oh, wait, one more thing, Corey. And it's better if you go to a therapist rather than your friends, because believe it or not, your friends kind of get tired of it after a while. And I'm only saying that because I've had a few friends with that Saturn Moon combination, and it does get old. I love them to death, but that's an important point. Therapists are there to listen. Your friends are there to have fun.
I recently had a close friend pass away back in December, and there was a little get together with a bunch of friends, and this this girl, I don't know her that well, but she started telling me all about her dad who died and all this stuff, and how she was never going to get over it. And I was like, you might want to see a therapist, because instead of just waiting till you get intoxicated and your subconscious mind just wants to take over and talk about all the stuff you've actually been suppressing the whole time, if you just talk to a professional about it and have a meeting, then when you go and hang out with your friends, you don't feel that urge to bring up stuff that you're hiding all the time. Or, once you have one drink or relax, then you just start rambling about your upset issue. You know what I mean?
Right.
Go to a therapist, vent these things out in a conscious way and get conscious help back. And don't just expect, your friends or anyone else to be a professional when you need professional help. And especially with men, I find, just because culturally men, at least here in the West, it's not really, you're not supposed to have weaknesses. You're supposed to just be great and just power through everything and work through everything. And that's not realistic. And so I'm really happy with when my male friends just go, when I tell them, go to a therapist, and they actually do. And I'm really happy with that. That's a lot of growth right there for someone who isn't willing to deal with their weakness to go to a therapist.
Well, and that's also part of Saturn's mission in a sense, because we don't want to deny grief. Grief is a
Yes.
very important part of life. It's joy, grief, all these things that are part of God as well. And if you can admit that you need help or assistance, or you can't work through it on your own, or you don't want to burden your friends with it, that's a step in the direction of working with Saturn, because that's saying, look, I have a flaw, I have a weakness, I have something I can't handle, and I need to reach out to the universe, to something else, whether it's a therapist or minister or counselor. Like, that is a step in the right direction to appeasing Saturn, because it's admitting you can't handle this.
Yeah.
And part of Saturn's role, he rules over Capricorn, and he also rules over Aquarius. And what is Aquarius? Well, Aquarius has a lot to do with working with the masses or reaching out to something greater than yourself.
Yes.
So Saturn isn't just about being alone and miserable. That's part of it. But it's also about learning to reach out when you need to reach out. So I think this is probably pretty good to talk about here. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And you just, with Saturn stuff, those are your toughest things. So you can work through them with a remedial measure, but making peace with it is a major thing. Do everything you can, but just make peace with it. And a lot of times, if you can't do that, a therapist can help you, or an objective counselor of some sort can help you to make peace with what you can't work on.
Right. Good. Well, we'll leave them with that in regards to Saturn and the Moon, and we'll move on to our final question, which does deal with Saturn and the Sun. And this is an interesting one. Interested to hear your take on it. So Saturn is considered to be an enemy of the Sun, in spite of Saturn being considered the Sun or the child of the Sun. Also, the logic of their corresponding exaltation and debilitation. I guess what the person's trying to figure out here is, how is it that Sun and Saturn are enemies? And what is the logic as far as Saturn's exaltation in Libra and Saturn's debilitation in Aries?
Okay. Well, I love to talk about this one. This is a lot of fun because Saturn and the Sun are such a unique yin and yang type of polarity. So Saturn is the child of the Sun and his shadow in the myths or whatever, in the Vedic myths. And I feel like that just represents, okay, so the Sun is the part of us that is one with God. We're like Shiva or whatever. We're everything. There's not even a need to relate to anything because we're everything. That part of us the only time it's really gonna mainly forget that is when Saturn shows up to basically reveal our mortality. You know, Saturn is where that's in our chart. It's our weakness. It's where we're very human and very frail and mortal. We're not the immortal, eternal sun anymore, where Saturn's at. So when you get them conjunct, there's problems because there's those parts of you are battling. And the reason that they're enemies is for that same reason, is because if you're ruled by the sun, say you're Leo, then you're wanting to run a kingdom. And then Saturn represents like all the little things that you can't really fix, you know what I mean? All the problems. So if you get hung up on that, or if you get hung up on fixing every little issue, and he rules the 7th house for a Leo, if you get hung up on the public or other nations, then your kingdom will suffer. And it kind of has to do with that. And then from Saturn's perspective, the sun is just always disrespecting him, always trying to make him be on that pure level of God, when he's not. He's down here on the earth trying to perform karmas. So they're just yin and yang. They're just opposite. Saturn's the one who moves the slowest in, winter time. The sun is the king in the summertime. Now, what I really like is the exaltation polarity of sun exalted in Aries and Saturn exalted in Libra. Saturn has to be lazy, in Libra, and the sun has to be really active all the time. Like the sun can't slow down, he has to be vigilant. He has to always be doing his thing. And so Aries just makes sense. Whereas Saturn needs to take his time because he's the thing that gets you through winter. The sun is that pure aspect of ourselves that is one with the infinite. And so from its standpoint, it has everything, all the energy it takes, just go, go, go. So Aries, the sign of the hero and the sign of war and charging and following your ideas and your inspirations, that fits for the sun. That's his exalted place. Because if you are the sun, if you are God, you can do whatever you want. So you want to go, go, go and do. Then we switch and we look at Libra and Saturn. Why is Saturn exalted in Libra? Saturn is about getting us through the winter time. Saturn is about endurance. He rules our longevity, about, living long enough to perform all the deeds we have to do. And he's about accomplishing deeds. And so Saturn needs to be in Libra. He needs to be lazy and relaxed and taking it easy so that when winter time comes, he's got enough fat in his gut. He can hang in there. He can survive. When Mars comes and attacks his village, he can handle the beating. That's what Saturn needs. And Libra is a very, relaxed, easygoing, fair sign. And Saturn does the best there because Saturn is the most mortal. He depends on others the most. So he wants to trade. He doesn't think he can do everything on his own, even though a strong Saturn kind of can. He embraces other people. Like you were saying about Aquarius, he reaches out to groups. Mm-hmm. So
Saturn in Libra then, since Libra is the natural 7th sign of the zodiac, and that deals with typically other people and the balance between people, that Saturn being exalted there, that just allows people to possibly bear the burden over a greater number of individuals. And it allows people to be very realistic about how to prepare for the future, how to weigh their choices for the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, when it's the opposite, when you get Saturn fallen in Aries, you get someone who doesn't take their time and doesn't rest and doesn't, just wants to go, 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 like I was saying, because it's agitated by Mars and it's starved. And so Saturn wants to go and do a million things. And then, so then when a health issue comes, he doesn't have the reserve or the longevity stored up to fight that. And so he's going to suffer a lot or die sooner, have weaker longevity. Whereas an exalted Saturn has sort of taken it more easy and slower through life, or maybe like like doing Tai Chi as you get older or something. Someone who's just sort of got more chi saved for the winter of their life, Yeah.
And a very quick point to mention here is that those of you who happen to have Saturn in Aries, Corey mentioned longevity. It doesn't mean that your longevity is you're going to die tomorrow. There are many things involved in the understanding of longevity. For example, Saturn may be debilitated, but he may be very different than Trimsumsha, the chart that deals with health. Saturn may be debilitated, but he also may be delighted by his friends. Saturn may not rule your 8th house. You may not go into a Saturn dasha until you're 86. So all these things, I just want to throw this in there, that these points that we make, if you're watching this video, it's probably because you're interested in Saturn and you have a mentality which is going to focus a little bit on those nastier things. So just be aware that there's a lot more to it than just Saturn and Aries. Okay.
Yeah, I'm speaking in generalities, and sort of like how astrology books speak to you. They speak in extremes so that you get the idea, but you have to know that life's never black and white, and that everything is a mixture. So yeah, I'm not trying to.
Yeah. And that combination with Saturn and Aries, that's interesting too, because then people say, well, what about Mars in Capricorn? And that's radically different, right? Because on one hand, you want to have that Martian energy restricted. You don't want a wild Mars going out on a rampage, torching villages and whatever it might be. You want that Mars as a soldier in a trained division to defend the country when necessary, right? And that's when you get Mars in Capricorn. And so it's not the same. And that's why Mars is an enemy to Saturn, but Saturn is not an enemy to Mars, right? Because they are different energies. One can actually help the other, even though the other doesn't necessarily help the one.
Yes, Mars doesn't see Saturn as an enemy. He'll take what he wants from Saturn, I guess, when he needs to.
Right.
Actually, and one note I feel like I should mention, because of seeing the gator earlier today, Capricorn being the sign of the crocodile or the gator or any aquatic animal, beast, Leviathan type thing, Mars represents, in a lot of ways, like work and action and, getting things done. Mars and Saturn are the 2 planets that really get everything done in the zodiac. And so if you think about why would Mars be exalted in Capricorn, the crocodile symbolizes doing an action that is done so well and so properly that it can never be outdone, And if you go and look at the crocodiles in the fossil record, I've done this myself in a museum, they've not changed or evolved in any way for millions and millions of years or however long. And so that's Saturn's job in Capricorn, the 10th sign. The karma bhava, it's a similar idea with the 10th house. It's about doing work that is so well done that it stands the test of time, that you don't have to go back next year and redo it, that Saturn doesn't have to come back for 30 years to that thing, He wants it to be as good as it was last time he was there.
Right.
And that's what Mars needs to do with his actions. So that's why Mars is exalted in the sign of the crocodile. Because crocodiles, man, they just don't move at all. They just sit there all day. He's just getting through winter, So if that crocodile was starved by Mars and was like, "Ooh, look at that duck, look at that," he'd waste all of his fat or his energy reserves and wouldn't make it through winter,
Right. It's pretty good. I never actually thought about crocodiles that way.
Yeah, apparently a friend of mine was telling me that when she was young, she even shot at crocodiles, and you can shoot them with bullets and they don't even flinch. They don't even move.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool because, from Saturn being a renunciate or even a yogi on some levels, that was very cool to me.
Detached and tough.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, that'll probably do it for today, Corey. Yeah, thank you for coming and speaking with us. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
Yeah.
Next time, maybe we can talk about Jupiter.
Yes.
Yeah. Seems like I've got a few interviews lined up, you and another fellow who will also be talking about Saturn. So now's the time for Saturn. Then we'll move on to Jupiter.
Yeah, we'll make it more optimistic. We'll make that one more optimistic.
All right. Well, Corey, I'll go ahead and I'll put your contact information at the bottom of this video. That way, if people want to reach you, they can. And is it better to reach you through email or phone, or does it matter?
Email is best. Just my name, Corey Dowds @gmail.com. You'll see it on my website if you go there. So.
All right, Corey. Well, take care. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Ryan.
And thanks.